December 5th through 13th, we'll be in the streets of Paris covering the activist response to COP21, the UN Climate Summit. Lines will be drawn, literally. We are the people over profit for planet. Exclusive interviews, insight, and daily coverage of events on the ground. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out in Paris. Welcome to Paris Update 1. The IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is the world's foremost collection of climate scientists. The group recently released its 5th assessment report on our continued fucking up of the planet. And as it stands, we will raise the temperature of the planet by 2 degrees Celsius if we limit our emissions. If not, that still significant rise in temperature will multiply. Quote, if emissions continue unabated, the world is on track to exceed this budget in only about 30 years, exposing communities to increasingly dangerous forest fires, extreme weather, drought, and other climate impacts. Yesterday in Paris, I visited Terra Expeditions and checked out their work with ocean science and the significance of ocean preservation in our fight against climate change. I spoke with Executive Director of Terra, Romain Troublet, who highlighted the importance of the oceans in all climate talks, saying, quote, we're the blue planet. 2/3 of our globe is water. Romain also pointed out that the ocean plays a very small role in the climate talks, so he felt it was Terra's job to, quote unquote, bring the ocean with them when they decided to come to Paris for the climate talks. While in Paris, Terra and her crew are here organizing educational forums, including movie screenings, interactive exhibits, and panels, in order to pressure governments and, perhaps more importantly, pressure the people to pay attention to the problem and, indeed, the solution beneath the waves. Indeed, harnessing wave energy is just one of the many ways that oceanic science and technology could help us avoid climate disaster. Terra and her crew spent a lot of time traveling the entire world in the 7 seas, studying everything from coral reefs to Arctic ice caps, cataloging the power and brilliance inherent in our own natural world, so we might understand it, respect it, and use it sustainably. For more information on Terra and her upcoming expeditions, check out terraexpeditions.org. And you will be hearing more from me soon. In the meantime, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. A bientôt. So we are here at an action for the Indigenous Environmental Network. And tell me, first of all, why you're in Paris, and then also why you're here at this specific action.
So I'm from Houston, Texas, and we brought a lovely banner here highlighting some of the issues that we've been trying to work on. And Houston is one of the largest concentrations of refineries and chemical plants in the world. And so a lot of the folks here are living in areas where there are similar situations, many of them at the source where the oil and gas and tar sands are being extracted. And oftentimes that ends up in our backyards where it's refined and then exported, to other countries and to the rest of the United States. So we're all joining forces here today to say that we need to put an end to this, fossil fuel industry. We need to move on to cleaner, safer, alternative energies, and we need to keep the remaining fossil fuels in the ground.
So what are you hoping to see here in Paris? Are you hoping to push the politicians, the people, like a global paradigm? What are you hoping to see here specifically?
There's a whole other process that's, I think, very difficult for folks to follow. So this bureaucratic COP21 process on how the world is going to deal with climate change. And there's many different levels of participation that's happening. One is to ensure that the indigenous rights are withheld, that are kept in the final document, but also that there's a real shift away from fossil fuels and away from, these false paradigms and false solutions that have been, presented to the body, so things like carbon trading, natural gas as an alternative fuel, many other things that are not real solutions but schemes and ways of commodifying nature are not going to work. And we're feeling the impacts. There are folks here whose lands are literally washing away because of climate change, and others who have lost, family members, mothers, daughters, brothers, sisters, from the toxics that also come from, the end source of these contaminants.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are here in Paris outside the Indigenous Environmental Network's press conference. It is December 6th, my birthday. What you're about to see right now is you're about to see parts of the press conference where members of First Nations and Indigenous tribes spoke about 3 documents that were delivered this morning to the UN. I also spoke with organizer of the Indigenous Environmental Network, Dallas Goldtooth, and you will see that interview as well. So without further ado, here we go.
People have come to Paris to discuss the solutions to climate change. We have governments gathering, talking about false solutions in Le Bourget, not aware that the solutions to climate change are right here. Our communities are the first ones to feel the effects of climate change. Our relationship to Mother Earth is being impacted, and our ability to live our traditional way of life is being destroyed. And even up until yesterday, the governments of the world refused to allow the rights of indigenous peoples to be placed into the Paris Agreement. That is not acceptable. The rights of indigenous peoples must be acknowledged and respected. In the legally binding text of the Paris Agreement, that is non-negotiable.
Para garantizar la seguridad efectiva de la existencia de las futuras generaciones, esta propuesta es para que los gobiernos y los gobernantes declaren nuestros territorios indígenas, que es vital importancia, como un patrimonio sagrado de la biodiversidad y cultural, libre de explotación petrolera, mineras, maderables y otros proyectos que afectan a la integridad de Causaxacha y la vida de los seres humanos.
Only if our proposal is heeded will we be able to ensure the future. Will we be able to ensure the planet for future generations? So we present this proposal to the governments of the world, and we declare that indigenous peoples' territories are of vital and crucial importance for the future of the planet, and that our territories and our lands are sacred heritage of this world, and there must be no more oil drilling, no more mining, no more logging in our lands and territories, and that we must embrace this indigenous proposal of the living forest.
I'm from the far north in the Arctic of Alaska. I'm Nets Aiguchin, Pitt River and Wintu. Alaska is ground zero of climate change. Not only are we, the indigenous people of the North, being impacted by climate change and climate chaos, but this is compounded by the assault of our traditional territories by the fossil fuel extractive industries. They are aggressively moving onto our traditional homelands in their pursuit of natural resources. Our very food security is at threat. We still hunt and fish to provide for our needs, but more so our close connection to the land provides us with our physical, cultural, spiritual, economic, and social needs. Climate change directly undermines our traditional livelihood and our ability to access our foods. The ground we walk on is literally melting beneath us. Whole communities are at threat of being climate refugees as they are being forced to relocate. Our cold homelands are now burning up at rates worse than we've ever seen in our lifetimes. We cannot predict our weather patterns anymore, which is essential to survival in our harsh environment. The fossil fuel companies see climate change as an opportunity. As the ice melts in the ocean, they salivate to drill offshore.
I'm a member of the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma. My colonized name is Casey Camp Hornick. I want to say thank you to the people of France for being so gracious to us in their homelands. And I want to acknowledge their ancestors, their indigenous peoples, and think of the spirits that came to join us in our ceremonies this morning. I want to acknowledge the pain of the people of France from the tragedy that was here on November the 13th. As we have said often, we indigenous people understand what it feels to be attacked, to have innocents killed, to have people not care whether you're women or children or elder when they come to look for you. In our case, we have suffered many generations in the United States where I'm from. And there in the United States at this time, the Ponca people in north central Oklahoma are suffering from environmental genocide. The first onslaught of the settlers came with bayonets, with rifles, with smallpox blankets. But now they come with refineries, with fracking, with pipelines. And they kill the air, they kill the earth, they kill the water, and that kills my people. At this time in Oklahoma, we've become the earthquake capital of the world because of fracking and because of injection wells. There's been 5,000 earthquakes there this year alone. As a great-grandmother, a mother, a daughter, a companion, a granddaughter, I've come to join hands, join hearts, join spirits with my relatives from the south, from the north, from the east, and from the west, and asking that all people pay attention to their future generations the same as we have been taught. The 7 generations to come deserve the best in the water, so that the water herself is prayed for every day, all the time by our people, so that the air, so that the earth, so that those things that sustain us are not commodified. We do not buy and sell the air. We do not buy and sell the water. We do not buy and sell the earth. We do not buy and sell the fire. Those are what the true powers of the earth are. They are not those sitting in the United Nations who are denying the rights of indigenous people. Those are simply human beings that are misunderstanding what the Creator has allowed them to be. So we're not asking them to change their ways. They're pitiful. We of the indigenous nations, we're told in prophecy that this would be the time that we would stand up and teach the world how to live in harmony. Because if the rights of indigenous people are upheld, you're our neighbors. Your children will be protected as well. And we care for all living beings. Those without a voice to speak are speaking through my relatives here, through the sacred ways that each of us holds dear. The Creator put us here for a reason. We listen, and we're telling you the truth.
It was essential for us to have indigenous frontline communities here in Paris for the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, because people need to see the frontline communities that are directly being impacted by climate change, by the increased global temperatures, by sea level rise, and so we have to present our folks, our spokespeople, and put them to the front so that people are understanding that these are the faces that are facing extinction. They're facing the destruction of their cultural lifeways and their relationship to Mother Earth. So that has to be stated first. The 3 documents that were presented today were basically the solutions, or the steps towards the solutions where we need to go. You know, we've been here for over a week. We've been on the inside for the United Nations conference, and all that's being discussed in there are carbon markets and offsets, and how can we put a price on carbon and use that as a form of credit and exchange, and blah blah blah. It's business as usual, and it's so we as community folks, as frontline communities, reject these false solutions and wanted to provide some solid steps forward. At least put something out there. And so the first document is the living spirit for the living spirit of the. Yeah, it's okay. The first document is the living spirit of the forest, which has been created by the Sarayaku of Ecuador, that advocates that not only should we recognize the rights of Mother Earth, but we have to acknowledge the living spirit of all creation, and that we have a responsibility to uphold that relationship as not just as indigenous peoples, but as all human beings. The second document that we had proposed, or that we had put forth, was the Keep It in the Ground Declaration. This declaration was created by indigenous peoples and also international NGOs, and that declaration advocates that in order for us to really take sincere steps to addressing climate change, we need to put a moratorium on all fossil fuel development, that we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground. The last one is the Indigenous Women's of the Americas Treaty, which advocates for direct action. It calls for Indigenous women and women of the world to step up, to take direct action to address climate change, and to offer community-based solutions.
Fantastic. And what do you expect the response to these documents to be, both on the government level and on the people and grassroots level?
Oh, I'm expecting them not to listen one lick. I'm expecting that as always, that those on the front line are going to be not listened to. I'm expecting that the governments, and oftentimes in these conferences, they only like us to be there for our feathers and ribbons, just to be there for press opportunities and not to really listen to what we're saying. So that's why we made it essential to do it out here, outside the COP, to the people, to those that are really passionate about addressing climate change, and to put that call out there that we need to defend Mother Earth, protect her at all costs, and to renew our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth. So that's why it was essential for us to do it outside. And so we put it out there. We encourage our allies and relatives across the world to listen to those solutions that were being put forth and help us together step forward to really make some true lasting change.
Okay, and finally, what are the next steps after today and even after COP21?
The next steps, we're going to be here for another week. We have the Indigenous Environmental Network has a whole week of direct actions that we're planning on the outside, in the inside, and just to continue to push out there that these are the people. This is the front line. And it's not just Native folks. We have a delegation of over 100 other folks from across the North America, impacted community justice communities. And so we're just going to try to create as much ruckus as possible to disrupt this business as usual conversation that's happening here. Beyond Paris, we want to take what we've learned here take the networks and the contacts we hear and take it home and have that and continue that dialogue of how can we take true lasting steps towards a just transition, towards a renewable society.
Okay, well, fantastic. Dallas Goldtooth, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck with the rest of your actions.
Thank you very much.